All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started. James it isn't not a long book. I think the gist of the book really is to try and help us understand how it is that we can be a good Christian and walk out a good Christian life. He's clarifying for us here what faith is and what it isn't. Right? He starts by asking the question, what good is it, brothers and sisters, if you say you have faith, but don't show it by your actions? He gives us an example of someone with no food or clothing and asks, what kind of faith do we have if we say the right thing, but don't do what's right? So what good is our faith if we aren't doing good by others? Is true faith less about my motivations for saving myself or more about helping others? Right? Again, I don't think it's an either or. It's like a, what do you say? Both and. In reading this, I'm kind of reminded of the scripture in Matthew 6, right? Where Jesus is talking about worry, right? And he's telling us, don't worry about tomorrow, right? And he gives the examples of like the birds, and they don't reap, they don't sow, but they're taken care of, right? The lilies of the field, they don't do anything to be clothed in majesty the way that they are. And at the end of that scripture, it says, don't worry about your everyday life. Seek the kingdom first, and these things will be added. And when I read this passage in James, it feels that same way to me. It's like, is this passage about how we ensure ourselves to be saved? Or is it, how do we ensure we take care of people because God loves them? And in doing that, the byproduct of that naturally is our salvation, right? Like our focus isn't obtaining our own salvation, it's just doing the will of God. Seek first the kingdom, and all these things will be added. Right? We shouldn't have to try to take care of others in order to be saved. When we genuinely care for others and couple that with faith, the natural byproduct is our salvation. I think it's easy to read a scripture like this and kind of make it like a checklist. I mean, James kind of uses this example. Some of the people are arguing, well, isn't it by faith or isn't it by works? As if the two things are different, right? Like they kind of look at them as siloed, faith and works. But there is no good works without faith. It's one thing bundled together. And as people, we like to argue, right? So throughout history, we want to just right? We just want to pinpoint the differences instead of the essence. What is the essence here? The essence is, it's love. It's about Christ's love for us, and how are we extending that to the world? In my time of study, one of the things that Jesus really highlighted for me that I don't think is blatantly obvious here is the importance of proper alignment. That alignment influences our works of faith, our own salvation, and the lasting impact that it has on the lost. And so before I kind of expound on that any further, I have two kind of pictures to show you, because it's probably not going to make sense unless you know where my head's at. All right. So if you could put that first one up. All right. So I don't like math, but I like statistics. I like statistical analysis. I kind of geek out over charts and stuff like this. So this, what you're looking at, is called an exponential function, okay? Right? You look at the graph. Look at the picture, right? So what we're looking at here, right? So this is like the growth of the population of the United States since whatever years down there, 10,000 BC, right? And it's assuming that the growth of population is only 1% every year, okay? So there's a 1% change year over year. And when you look at a chart like this, you can see that for a good 80% of that chart, it doesn't look like it moves. It's growing at 1% a year, but it doesn't look like it's moving whatsoever. And then all of a sudden, right, you have this effect of compounding, and you go from something that looks like it doesn't move whatsoever, just completely explodes off the chart. Right? And so one of the things I'm going to discuss today is just how in us, when we have small changes, when we have small ways that we grow in separation from Christ, even though they don't seem big at the time, they don't seem big for a while, how over time, if we're not careful, we go from being really close to super far away. Right? With just 1%. If you could put up the second one. This, I think, is kind of more indicative of what our lives with Jesus actually look like. I mean, let's be honest. He's not asking us for perfection. He's the perfection. He's asking us to strive. And so when you're looking at like a stock chart like this, you have the green line at the bottom. It's called the support. You have the red line at the bottom. It's called resistance. And I think for this example, it's great. We want to be close to the support, but on stocks, you don't. You want to be way over resistance. You want to create new support levels. But for this example, understand that our walk with Jesus, it is one that is dynamic, right? We're always on this like up and down. We're close to him. We're far from him. We're sold out to him. We're tired. We're confused. All of the things. And so I just want you to kind of keep this picture in your head as to like what it looks like for us to go back to cling to get back to our support that is Jesus, and the necessity for us to do so. It's easy to stay in subtle misalignment, but the persistence in that condition of faith creates not only distance between us and our Creator, but leaves us with a powerless, inconsistent example of life to offer a watching world. We say we love Jesus, but do our actions match that statement? We say we love Jesus, but do our actions only match for some things? We say we love Jesus, but have an internal grading system, super complex one, as to what qualifies as valuable enough for our actions to actually match up to. I don't know about you guys, but I'm misaligned AF. You know what I'm saying? There is an inconsistency between my actions or inaction and my stated claim of faith in Jesus. Thank God for his grace and for the fact that he's not demanding perfection from us, right? So long as there's progress, the battle, the up and down, clinging to that support, right? So long as our goal is progress and drawing near to him, there's hope. When our faith and actions don't align, there's consequences. Not only will we find ourselves persisting in a dying faith, we'll eventually only have an empty shell to offer the world. A quick look around our culture should tell us something. In the West, the church as a whole hasn't been doing so hot. Yeah? Anybody? Right? According to a 2020 Pew study, people identifying as Christians has decreased from 90% in 1972 to 64% in 2020. Right? Yeah. And I mean, this is almost 4 years ago. And when you think of something like the exponential chart that I showed you, right? You think of how something changing slowly over a long period of time. And eventually you just have this explosion. Like, we're on the precipice of something super scary. That kind of picture of like only having an empty shell to offer the world, I was thinking about like eating roasted peanuts. I don't eat roasted peanuts very often. I mean, unless I'm at like one of those restaurants where they serve them in a big barrel and you throw them on the floor, or at like a baseball game. That's it. But I mean, I do like peanuts generally. But you ever go to eat a peanut and you crunch it and you either find one of two things. One, it's hollow on the inside. There's no nut. Don't understand how that even happened. How did it form the shell on the outside? Or two, you have this tiny, hard, tiny little peanut on the inside that you can't do anything with, right? Unless you want to break a tooth. And it's like, if we're not careful, then what we have to offer the world, and when I say the world and you think of the lost, it's not just, like a lot of times I think maybe in our heads we think people out there, like I have teenage boys, they count. They're barely saved if they are. You know what I mean? Like my faith, my testimony, it matters because like I'm witnessing every day to people, even if they're not out there. You know, our kids, our grandkids. How did we get here? How do we view our relationship with faith and deeds that James is speaking about, and where is the breakdown occurring in our own lives? And trying to find some testimony of people who have been and continue to walk away from their faith, you know, went to the internet, where most people go, and interwebs, yeah, Reddit, TikTok, YouTube. If my father-in-law was here, he'd be clapping. He loves YouTube. And here's some of the statements made by non-Christians that I found. And for a lot of these people, it's people that like grew up in church but walked away at some point. Right? So one is division, obviously. If you haven't been through a church split, there's a chance that at some point you'll see one. You know? Seeing Christians doing better, morally, loving better, relationally, and treating others better than those that claim to be Christian. I think that's a pretty fair statement. No? I mean, I've known a lot of great people. My grandfather was one of those people. He was one of the most loving, caring, kind-hearted people that I knew, and he went to his deathbed hating Jesus. And yet there's Christians that claim to believe what we believe and have such a hard heart. It's hard to make sense of it. The way that Christianity is tied up in politics and nationalism. Man, as we come into an election season here, we're not so far removed that we should forget the separation that caused amongst family. It's not worth it. Christians who are bad examples of what they say they believe, hypocrisy, no meaningful difference between those inside and outside the church, both in deed and attitude, right? Right? As Christians, we're supposed to be full of hope and joy and peace and love. Sometimes, yeah. Christians are rude. I mean, I almost gave a disclaimer for my face. I've been accused of having a not nice resting face. Years back, I worked in a call center. I worked there for a long time, for almost 12 years, and I had the great pleasure of meeting some of the most awesome people and also not so awesome people in that time. Most of those people were, probably between the ages of 18 and 35, a couple outliers over 50. And I was about 8 years into my life as a Christian. And just to kind of give you some context, like I met my wife. I started this job because I was valet parking and needed something legit, right? I get engaged to be married. I become a Christian. 14 days later, I'm engaged to be married. 12 months later, I'm married. Terrible baby Christian. I was the worst baby Christian, okay? I mean, it was bad. I had just been promoted at my work, coming up the ranks in church, right? Anyone that's done normal church, you know what that's like. And I started Bible college. Having just come out of one of the most sleepless, thankless seasons of my life, Bible college really put some wind in my sails. I learned a lot while I was there, and one of the big things was definitely evangelism. Uh, for that, I'm eternally grateful. I think that experience gave me a heart for the lost that I don't know I would have had otherwise. Um, they're also big into soul winning, right? So like this idea that you go out, you talk to someone, it's like closing sales though. It's like, you got a script, you read the script, they repeat the script, boom, no, check mark. I mean, you're turning the stuff in at the. So during that period, working in the call center, I kind of use my position as a manager. This is probably and right. The company got sold, so I'm not really worried about anybody knowing about it. But I'd take my agents like to the back, and it's like, all right, we're gonna talk about Jesus for a little bit. This is not a coaching session. We're not talking about your calls, your call flow, and your sales skills. We're gonna talk about Jesus. And I've lost my place here. So going to these meetings, read them that same kind of script, feel like, yes, it's like another person on my list. It's another soul that I got to win for Jesus. That was my concept at the time. And I was pumped. I'm normally not an outgoing person. I'm not. Like if you know me, you know it takes a while, right? Like my vetting process is pretty extensive. Once you get to know me, completely different story, okay? You can't shut me off. But leading up to that, not so much. So I was really launched out of my shell during this time of Bible college, and my experience with church up to this point was like beautiful, rose-colored glasses, like nothing bad had ever happened yet. It's like I came from a place where people were bad and you got hurt. I was in church at this point and figured that like this is great. This stuff doesn't take place. It's like I spent a lot of time with non-believers, and I learned a lot about them and how they perceive Jesus. A few of my main takeaways from that time is, there's those who are skeptical about Jesus, but somewhat open. Those who are totally opposed to him. Those who agreed, right? But if I'm honest, they were worse heathens than I was, according to me. And those who viewed it with complete contempt. And that last group always got me. I didn't understand, right? Someone like my grandfather, like what happened to you that you just are not even willing to to hear about Jesus? I don't get it. And it really broke my heart. As I spent more time with them, their stories about negative interactions with Christians in the church followed. A married woman whose husband was a pastor caught in affairs. A kid whose uncle took him to church, to youth group, abused him. A daughter whose dad was a pastor, disowning her after he found out she was gay. And like there's countless other stories from my own experience and others that exist. I had a plan at this point in my life. Bible college was the first step to that plan. It was supposed to be life-giving. It was supposed to be the road leading to a life working in ministry, constantly surrounded by others who loved Jesus, where praise and miracles flowed in abundance. I was going to preach to thousands and make disciples of all the nations. And that's when I started getting my first taste of deeds not lining up with our declared faith. The best soul winner at school was kind of a jerk to everybody. The most anointed teacher there was actually a jerk to students. I mean, yelling, degrading them when he thought no one else was around. Back office conversations where, we're just discussing the congregation, but really it's gossip, but we're discussing the conversation. Like those types of things happening. And me just kind of watching. I got my first taste of why some of these people that were so discontented with the faith, like why they might feel that way. And what followed these revelations was what I thought to be righteous anger. The truth was that it was just sinful judgment on my part. My own life was riddled with inconsistencies. I had high spiritual aspirations, dreams of all the big works that I would do, but completely neglected the importance of all the small works that were in my power to act on. On one hand, I'm praying for people for their salvation and get home and couldn't be bothered to have a meaningful conversation with my wife. Pray healing for people, come home and scream at my kids because they're being kids. And I'm exhausted. Along with the breakdown I was witnessing in the church for the first time, I was also beginning to see my life in a different light. I was caught up in the dream of impacting many for Jesus, but failed at impacting the people in my own home. What if the key to living a faith like James describes, one that not only benefits us, but impacts a watching world, isn't measured by how we stack up in the big things, but in the little ones as well? Is it possible to get so caught up on the big areas of surrender that we neglect the small ones? As I speak to this group of missionaries, I have no doubt that you understand the assignment. Like the examples of Abraham and Rahab, we play a role in the legacy that is left for future generations and how they view their relationship with Jesus. You know how your obedience has the potential for massive impact in the communities you serve. We fully comprehend the importance of things to which we've been called. We get the gravity of the big dreams and the costly sacrifices to get there, but how often do we lose sight of the little? How easily do we take for granted the gravity of the daily mundane works in our lives and the tremendous impact that those things might be having on the world around us? I don't know what that looks like for you. I'm still broken in so many ways, trying to do better by my family, by my wife, by my kids. But if I'm honest, I'm still scared that all of my inconsistencies are going to skew the way that they see Jesus. How can we discern our current position then and progress? Pray. I know, that's worse advice. Not the worst advice, but sometimes it's like escape. It's like a cop-out of advice. You should pray, and we should confess to one another and kneel at the feet of Jesus. But something that I personally have found extremely valuable in my life, I learned from Gary Vee. Any Gary Vee fans here? Yeah? And that is to ask people. If you really want to find out how you're doing in an area, we already know that we can lie to ourselves really well. Right? And if you have people that are like really close to you, they might be just as willing to lie. So you need people that are honest. So my advice would be like take different groups of people that you know. We kind of all have them, right? We got church friends, we got work friends, we got school friends, right? Those type of deals. But like just write down like 10, 15 questions about like what are the things that you really want to know about you? And give it to people who you think are actually going to give you honest answers. You could do it in person, but it's a hard conversation to have. Right? Especially when they start telling you the truth and you don't want to hear it. Right? But ask people, they'll tell you. My kids let me know where I'm at all the time. My wife lets me know, and I fight her on it for sure. I need you to prove it to me. Similar to the concept of the exponential graph that we looked at, there's something called the 1 degree rule that Air Force pilots use. Excuse me. It's said that for every 1 degree a plane gets off course, you'll miss your targeted landing spot by 92 feet for every mile that's flown. So if you were just 1 degree off course from JFK, New York, to LAX in California, you'd wind up 40 miles off in the Pacific Ocean. Crazy, right? Just 1%. Church, what's our 1%? what's the thing that we're not completely like veering off on? Right? When you think of like alignment being off, I always think about like a car. You know it's off because you let go of the steering wheel and you real quick, right? Like, but like this type of misalignment, it's subtle, it's sneaky. We don't even realize it's happening. We may not even know what that is. So I want us all to ask God this morning to reveal to us what's our 1%. What are the things that we were once diligent in doing that we now find ourselves doing a little bit less? I know for me, one that I realized in the time of this study was intentional prayer for divine appointment. It was something I used to do often, and I can't remember the last time I did it. And then yesterday at work, our brother Chuck shows up there. We end up striking up a conversation. He had no idea who I was. I had no idea who he was. We're talking work, family, real estate, church. Come to find out, he's here at the underground, right? I'm completely freaking out about giving the talk today, and I'm asking Jesus, like, please just show me that you're here, that you're listening. And then he's like, yeah, I really didn't need to come. I just haven't seen my Medicare advisor in a couple years, so I thought I'd swing by. And it reminded me of something that I used to do that I just don't anymore. Guys, I'm sorry, worship team, if you want to come on. Completely missed that boat. If there's ever a next time, I'll do better, I think. Guys, as we close out this morning, I know that I'm the kind of person that doesn't like to admit where there's weakness. I don't really like to admit where I'm wrong or where I don't have the answer. And I know this probably looks different for everybody here, right? But would our prayer this morning be for Jesus to truly reveal what are the things that we don't even recognize are taking us so far off of have the potential to take us so far off of the path? What is it? The sooner we get rid of it, the sooner we can continue to cling to Jesus. I mean, I know that lots of people in here, we've seen countless walk away from their faith, yeah? They were here, we thought they were strong, and they just, from one day to the next, they were here and then gone. Why? How? How did that happen? Small changes over a long period of time.